The Galactic Council chamber was buzzing with anxious murmurs as representatives from dozens of alien species filled the vast, glittering hall. High above, shimmering holograms of conquered worlds rotated slowly, reminders of the Council's dominance. At the center stood Elder Valthor of the Sorthan Dominion, his leathery skin glinting under the dim light. He raised a clawed hand, and silence fell. "We have received troubling reports," Valthor announced, his voice low and gravelly. "The human species, once considered primitive and inconsequential, has begun to spread beyond their solar system. Their expansion cannot be tolerated." A ripple of agreement moved through the chamber, but one figure remained motionless, Ambassador Kell of the Ivrak, a slender being with translucent blue skin and eyes like molten silver. He cleared his throat, catching Valthor's attention. "Elder Valthor," Kell began cautiously, "I must urge caution. My people have studied the humans extensively. They are unpredictable. Provoking them could be catastrophic." Valthor snorted, a harsh, dismissive sound. "You fear primitives, Ambassador? We are the Council. No species has defied us and survived." Kell swallowed his frustration, glancing nervously at the representatives around him. "You do not understand," he insisted. "Humans are resilient. They adapt quickly. And when threatened, they unite. You must heed my warning. Provoking them may lead to unimaginable consequences." Another council member, a massive, armor-plated creature from the Krulon war clans, scoffed. "Your caution sounds like cowardice, Ivrak. We crushed the Rakkar horde when they resisted, and they were twice as powerful as these humans." "But humans are different," Kell almost shouted, his voice trembling. "They have fought each other for millennia, perfected the art of war, and never surrendered. Their entire history is built on survival through conflict. We must be diplomatic." Valthor smirked. "Diplomacy is for the weak. We will remind them who controls this galaxy." As the debate raged on, far from the chamber, humanity's outpost on Proxima Centauri picked up a transmission, a coded message warning of an impending invasion. Captain Mira Lang of the UHS Resolute narrowed her eyes as she listened, her jaw tightening. "Council forces are amassing," her communications officer reported grimly. "They're calling it a containment protocol." Mira slammed a fist onto the console. "They think they can intimidate us. They're in for a rude awakening." She glanced at her crew, hardened veterans who had defended humanity from the hostile environments of alien worlds. The resolve in their eyes matched her own. "Send out a wide-band message," Mira ordered. "Let them know that Earth doesn't bow. If they want a fight, we'll give them one." As the message echoed through space, reaching Council forces and allies alike, Kell felt a shiver of dread. He knew that somewhere the humans were preparing. The Council had just awakened something fierce and unyielding, and he feared the consequences more than ever. The Council's fleet moved with unwavering confidence, an armada of colossal warships gliding through the void toward human-claimed space. At the forefront, the dread Sovereign, Valthor's flagship, led the charge, a massive obsidian-colored behemoth bristling with weaponry and powered by a core of volatile star energy. Inside the command center, Valthor watched the tactical screens with cold satisfaction. Beside him stood General Threx of the Krulon war clans, his armored bulk taking up considerable space. "Scouts report minimal resistance," Threx rumbled. "Humans appear unaware of our presence." Valthor smirked, tapping a claw against the console. "They have no idea of the storm that's about to break over their heads. Once we break their military backbone, they'll be on their knees." But not everyone shared his confidence. Ambassador Tell had been given permission to observe, though Valthor made no secret of his disdain for the Ivrak's warnings. Kell watched the screens in grim silence, remembering every lesson his people had learned about humanity. He knew it was too late to stop the Council's arrogance now. Back on the UHS Resolute, Captain Mira Lang was a flurry of motion, coordinating defenses with the rest of Earth's fledgling fleet. Unlike the Council's massive warships, human vessels were smaller, leaner, and vastly outnumbered. Yet Mira stood resolute, steel-eyed, and fierce, knowing that this battle wasn't just about survival. It was about proving that humanity wouldn't be crushed under any boot, alien or otherwise. "Captain, enemy forces are entering the outer perimeter," Lieutenant Ray called out, his fingers dancing across the console. "They're broadcasting demands for immediate surrender." Mira scoffed. "Patch them through." The screen flickered, and Valthor's imposing visage appeared, his golden eyes glinting with contempt. "Humans, you are ordered to cease all resistance and prepare for annexation. Your colonies are now under the protection of the Galactic Council." Mira crossed her arms, leaning toward the camera. "Funny how you call it protection when your guns are pointed right at us." Valthor sneered. "You should be grateful. Your kind will be given work and purpose within our dominion. Resisting will only result in needless casualties." Mira raised an eyebrow. "You think we fear death? We've been fighting to survive since the dawn of our existence. We're not going to roll over just because you say so." Valthor's jaw tightened. "Then you'll burn with your world." The transmission cut off, and Mira turned to her crew. "Prepare for full engagement. They're coming, and they're not holding back." Ray hesitated. "Captain, they outnumber us 10-1. Mira gave a wicked grin. "Good. They won't see it coming." With a sharp command, she activated the ship's secret weapon. Project Wildfire. The Resolute pulsed with energy as its experimental railgun array powered up, capable of hurling slugs at near-light speed. The Council had expected conventional plasma weaponry, not kinetic projectiles that could puncture their energy shields like paper. The first salvo tore through the nearest Council frigate, ripping it in half before its crew even realized they were under attack. Panic rippled through the alien ranks as more human ships unleashed similar firepower, targeting vital weak points with ruthless precision. On the Dread Sovereign, Valthor reeled back in shock as status reports poured in. "What is this? How are they—" General Threx growled, rage twisting his features. "They're targeting our reactors. Shields are useless against their munitions." Valthor snarled. "Adapt, damn it! Focus fire on their flagship." But Mira wasn't going to sit still. "Execute Maneuver Delta 6, she barked, and the human fleet fragmented into chaotic, weaving formations designed to confuse enemy targeting systems. As Valthor struggled to regain control, Kel couldn't help but whisper, "I warned you." Humans don't follow the rules of war. They rewrite them. In the midst of the chaos, Mira's voice rang out across the human comms. "No fear, no surrender. Show them who they're messing with." With humanity's unexpected and brutal counterattack, the Council Armada found itself trapped in a storm of fire and steel, and for the first time in centuries, the invincible Galactic Council knew fear. The Dread Sovereign shook violently as another kinetic slug tore through its lower decks, venting atmosphere and debris into space. Valthor steadied himself, gripping the railing as alarms blared throughout the command center. His rage burned hotter than a dying star. "Status report," he bellowed. A panicked technician, his scales glistening with sweat, called out, "Multiple hull breaches on decks 4 through 7. Shield integrity at 30%. Human projectiles are bypassing our defenses entirely." Valthor slammed his fist against the console. "How can this be? No species has ever pierced our shielding." General Threx glowered, his armored form towering over the crew. "They use kinetic weapons instead of energy. Primitive but terrifyingly effective." Valthor snarled, his pride stinging like an open wound. "Then use brute force. Wipe them out." As the Council ships recalibrated, unleashing torrents of plasma and ion fire toward the agile human vessels. Mira Lang danced the Resolute through the chaos, weaving between lethal energy bolts. "Status," Mira demanded, sweat beading on her forehead. Ray's fingers flew over the controls. 5 enemy warships down, but they're adjusting their strategy. They're focusing fire on us. Mira grinned, eyes blazing with determination. "Let them. Activate magnetic countermeasures. Scramble their targeting systems." Magnetic pulses erupted from the human ships, distorting the targeting arrays of the alien armada. Plasma bolts veered off course, missing by crucial meters. Council gunners howled in frustration as their shots hit empty space or collided with their own vessels. Back on the dread Sovereign, Valthor watched in mounting horror as his forces faltered. "How are they doing this?" "They're supposed to be primitive." Kell spoke up, his voice unnervingly calm. "I warned you, Elder. Humans have spent centuries perfecting the art of warfare. They innovate under pressure. Their strength lies not just in their weapons, but in their minds, their ability to adapt." Valthor whipped around, venom in his glare. "You think they will prevail against us? We have ruled this galaxy unchallenged for millennia." Kell looked out at the flickering tactical displays, where more council ships exploded under relentless human fire. "Perhaps that was your mistake. You thought they were like every other species you've conquered, easily intimidated, quick to submit. But humans have always been different. You underestimated their spirit." Valthor roared in frustration, smashing a data pad to the floor. "No more games. Unleash the ether bomb. I want their entire fleet annihilated." Kell froze, disbelief washing over him. "The ether bomb? That will destroy half this sector. You'll wipe out their worlds?" Valthor sneered. "If they will not kneel, they will burn. Activate it." As the device charged deep within the bowels of the dread Sovereign, Kell made a decision. Quietly, he slipped his slender fingers over a nearby console, transmitting a coded signal to the human fleet. On the Resolute, Ray's eyes widened as he deciphered the message. "Captain, we're picking up an encrypted warning, something called the ether bomb. It's powering up on their flagship." Mira's jaw tightened. "If that thing goes off, it'll take us and our colonies with it. Target the flagship's core, maximum power. We end this now." One final shot, calculated and fired with ruthless precision, blasted through the dread Sovereign's weakened shields, puncturing its core. The resulting explosion tore the flagship apart, sending shockwaves through the alien formation. The ether bomb, destabilized and incomplete, detonated in a massive implosion that folded space around it, dragging nearby warships into the vortex. Silence fell over the battlefield as the surviving council ships, leaderless and demoralized, broke formation and fled. Mira exhaled, relief washing over her. "Message to all fleets," she ordered. "Stand down and regroup. The enemy has retreated." As the stars settled once more, Mira stared at the wreckage of the dread Sovereign with a fierce glint in her eyes. Let that be a lesson to them. Humanity doesn't back down. Not now, not ever. And far across the void, the Galactic Council finally understood the terrifying truth. Humans were not just another species to be dominated. They were a force to be reckoned with. In the aftermath of the battle, the surviving human ships drifted among the wreckage of the once mighty Council fleet. Crews moved with weary triumph, patching up damage and tending to the wounded. Captain Mira Lang stood on the bridge of the Resolute, her expression hard but proud. "Status report," she called out, her voice steady despite the exhaustion weighing on her. Lieutenant Ray gave a grim nod. "We lost 3 ships. The Vanguard, Ironclad, and Spirit of Terra didn't make it. Casualties are high, but we drove them off, Captain. They're in full retreat." Mira closed her eyes for a moment, honoring the fallen. They didn't die in vain. Make sure their families know what they did today. They stood between humanity and extinction. As Ray acknowledged her orders, a communication signal flashed on the console. Mira frowned. Source? Ray raised an eyebrow. It's from the Council remnants. Patch it through? Mira nodded. The display flickered, and to her surprise, Ambassador Kell appeared, his face weary and lined with regret. Captain Mira Lang, he began, his voice solemn. I owe you and your people an apology. I warned them, but they wouldn't listen. Mira crossed her arms, regarding him with guarded curiosity. You're the one who warned us about the ether bomb. Kell inclined his head. I did. And I did so because I know what your kind is capable of. The Council has long seen humanity as nothing more than an upstart species, a nuisance. But I knew better. I've studied your history. I tried to convince them that provoking you would be disastrous. They ignored me, and paid the price. Mira's expression softened slightly. You saved a lot of lives. Why betray your own people? Kell hesitated, his silver eyes dimming. Because I have seen what happens to species that resist the Council. My own people were once proud and independent. We fought them, and lost. They crushed us, broke our spirit, made us vassals. When I saw that they intended to do the same to humanity, I couldn't let it happen again. Mira glanced around the bridge, seeing the respect and curiosity in her crew's eyes. What do you want now, Kell? The ambassador took a deep breath. To help. The Council will not take this defeat lightly. They will return, stronger and angrier. I know their tactics, their weaknesses. Let me aid your people. Humanity needs allies now more than ever. Mira looked at him, weighing his words carefully. Trust doesn't come easy after what just happened. But you proved yourself when it mattered. We'll accept your help. For now. Kell nodded, relief evident in his posture. I will not betray that trust, Captain. As the transmission ended, Mira turned to Ray. Get that intel decrypted. I want to know everything Kell sent over, and start repairs. This isn't over yet. Ray gave a wry smile. Do you really think the Council will come back after that beating? Mira's eyes hardened. They will. Pride and power don't let go that easily. But next time, we'll be ready. Days passed as the remnants of the human fleet returned to Earth, greeted by cheering crowds and somber ceremonies for the fallen. Mira was hailed as a hero, but she knew the cost of victory too well to celebrate. Humanity had shown its might, but the galaxy wouldn't soon forget. Or forgive. In the shadows of power on the Galactic Council's homeworld, surviving Council members gathered, their pride wounded and their resolve unbroken. Elder Valthor's death had sparked both outrage and fear, and plans for retribution were already underway. But for now, in the quiet of space, humanity stood unbroken, fierce, determined, and more unified than ever. They had faced the galaxy's greatest power and made them retreat in fear. And as Captain Mira Lang looked up at the stars from the bridge of the Resolute, she couldn't help but feel a spark of hope among the embers of war. Humanity was no longer the galaxy's prey. They were warriors, survivors, and a force that would never back down. Weeks passed since the battle, but the victory left a mark far deeper than the debris still orbiting Proxima Centauri. Earth had changed, no longer isolated or naive. News of the Council's defeat spread like wildfire, igniting hope among oppressed species across the galaxy. In the makeshift war room of the Resolute, Mira sat at a circular table with the key figures of humanity's new defensive alliance. Kell stood to her right, now an unofficial advisor, his once pristine robes replaced with more practical attire. To her left was Admiral Harlan Reddick, a grizzled veteran whose stern face betrayed no emotion. "We've received transmissions from 4 alien species," Ray reported, displaying the messages on the central holoscreen. "All of them are seeking alliances or protection. The Council's defeat has sparked resistance movements on at least 3 occupied worlds." Admiral Reddick snorted. "So now they want our help?" "Where were they when we were on our own?" Mira shot him a look. "It doesn't matter. If we want to survive, we need allies. We can't stand alone when the Council inevitably strikes back." Kel cleared his throat, drawing cautious glances. "The Council will regroup, but they will not act without caution this time. They will study your tactics, analyze every aspect of your strategy. Next time, they will be prepared." Mira frowned, folding her arms. "Then we have to change the game before they get the chance. We can't just sit and wait for them to gather their forces. We need to hit them where it hurts, disrupt their supply lines, weaken their control over the conquered worlds." Reddick raised an eyebrow. "You're suggesting we go on the offensive?" "Risky, Captain. We barely survived the last fight." "But it worked," Mira countered. "They expected us to be weak and compliant. We need to keep surprising them. Show the galaxy that humanity doesn't just defend. We fight back." Kel hesitated. "If you truly wish to weaken them, there is one target that would send shockwaves through their empire, the Citadel of Concordance. It is the heart of their power, where all decisions are made and where their most secure data cores are housed." Ray's eyes widened. "You're talking about striking the Council's capital? That's suicide." Kel glanced at Mira. "Perhaps. But if you could infiltrate it, even just to gather intelligence, it would shatter their illusion of invulnerability. The Council's strength lies not just in force, but in fear. Show them that even their heart can be threatened, and their grip will weaken." Mira leaned back, her mind racing. "We'd need a stealth ship, something fast and small with enough firepower to defend itself, but quiet enough to slip past their patrols." Reddick grunted. "We have a prototype, the Ghost Runner, experimental cloaking tech. But it's risky. We haven't tested it in combat." A hint of a smile crossed Mira's lips. "Sounds perfect. We'll need a skeleton crew, volunteers only. This isn't a mission we come back from if we fail." Kel's expression softened. "You are truly willing to risk so much to strike at their heart?" Mira fixed him with a steely gaze. "They made one mistake. They underestimated humanity. I won't let them get a second chance." Within hours, the Ghost Runner was prepped, its sleek black hull almost invisible against the void. Mira personally handpicked her crew, Ray as her communications and tech specialist, Lieutenant Imani Cade for tactical support, and Kel, whose knowledge of the Citadel's layout made him indispensable. As the ship powered up, Mira addressed the small crew. "This mission isn't just about survival. It's about sending a message to the Council, to the galaxy, and to ourselves. We're not just survivors. We're fighters. We're the ones who stand up when everyone else kneels. If we make it back, we'll have shattered the Council's hold over the galaxy. If we don't, they'll know we didn't die quietly." Imani grinned, fierce and unyielding. "Let's give 'em hell, Captain." The Ghost Runner launched into the dark, its engines purring almost silently as it slipped into hyperspace. The journey would take days, but the crew remained focused and tense, knowing that every second brought them closer to the heart of enemy territory. Mira stood on the bridge, hands clasped behind her back, eyes fixed on the swirling patterns of hyperspace outside the viewport. She couldn't help but feel the weight of humanity's future pressing down on her shoulders. Kel moved to stand beside her. "You remind me of the warriors of old from my world. Stubborn, fearless, dangerous." Mira gave a slight smile. "I'm not fearless, Kel. I'm terrified. But fear doesn't stop us. It fuels us. It's why we keep fighting. It's why they'll never break us. Kel nodded slowly, as if finally understanding the fundamental truth about humanity. They weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting to be free, to prove that no force in the galaxy could make them bow. And as the Ghost Runner sped toward the heart of the enemy, Mira knew that one way or another, the galaxy would remember this day. The day humanity refused to be crushed. The Ghost Runner dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Concordance system, its cloaking technology humming softly to keep them hidden from the patrols swarming the sector. The Council's capital world, Concordia Prime, hung in the distance, a massive planet wrapped in shimmering energy fields and bristling with defense satellites. Orbiting the planet were dozens of warships, each one capable of reducing a city to rubble in seconds. Mira peered at the display, her jaw clenched. There it is, the heart of their empire. Ray adjusted the sensors, keeping their signatures dampened. Those defense grids could fry us before we even get within scanning range. We'll have to time our approach perfectly. Lieutenant Imani Cade glanced at the tactical readouts. Her dark eyes narrowed. We can't just sneak in. We'll need a distraction, something to draw their eyes away from the perimeter. Kel spoke up, his voice calm but purposeful. The Citadel's communication network relies on central relays in the upper atmosphere. A coordinated disruption would force them to redirect resources to restore connectivity. If we can hack one of the satellites and trigger a cascade failure, it will look like a system malfunction. Ray nodded. That might just work. We'd have a small window to slip through while they're busy putting out fires. Mira gave a tight smile. Do it. Ray, get into their network. Imani, prep the cloaking field to boost power as soon as we're in. Kel, keep an eye out for any shifts in patrol patterns. As Ray worked his magic, Mira couldn't help but feel the tension gnawing at her spine. One mistake here, one wrong calculation, and they'd be obliterated before even touching down. Finally, Ray gave a triumphant nod. Got it. Triggering satellite disruption. Now. The screen flickered as one of the orbital relays sparked and died, sending cascading errors through the network. Alarms sounded across the Council's fleet, and Mira watched as ships shifted their positions, moving to secure the damaged relay. Now's our chance, Mira whispered. Take us in full stealth. The Ghost Runner glided through the chaos, slipping past patrol routes with surgical precision. Mira held her breath as a massive dreadnought drifted within a kilometer of their position, its gun arrays swiveling as if sensing something was off. But the ship kept moving, oblivious to the tiny predator in its shadow. As they approached the Citadel itself, a towering crystalline spire rising from the planet's surface, Kel pointed to an auxiliary docking port near the base. There, it's used for maintenance drones and rarely guarded. Mira nodded. Bring us in, Ray. Imani, be ready to lock down the ship if things go south. The Ghost Runner latched onto the docking port, and Mira led the team onto the boarding ramp, checking her pulse rifle before giving the nod. Remember, we're ghosts, in and out without raising the alarm. The corridor they entered was dimly lit, automated systems humming in the background. Kel guided them through maintenance passages and ventilation shafts, avoiding patrols and security nodes with practiced ease. As they crept through the Citadel's lower levels, Mira couldn't help but notice how pristine and sterile everything appeared. No trace of the fierce warriors they'd fought before. It was as if the heart of the Empire was insulated from the bloodshed it commanded. They reached the data core chamber, a vast room filled with pulsing blue conduits and crystalline interfaces. Kel moved to the terminal, inserting a data spike and beginning the download. Ray glanced at the progress bar. 30%, 40, come on, faster. Suddenly, Imani hissed, raising her weapon. Contacts, 2 guards coming this way. Mira signaled for silence, pressing against the wall as the footsteps drew closer. 2 council soldiers, clad in reflective armor, moved past, chatting in their native tongue. Mira held her breath, finger on the trigger, but they continued down the corridor without noticing. 60%, Ray whispered. Almost there. Kel frowned, his fingers dancing across the interface. There's something else here. Encoded files marked Project Ascendance. This wasn't part of the standard data core. Mira's eyes narrowed. Can you get it? I'm trying. It's heavily encrypted. The download completed with a soft chime, and Kel yanked the spike free. Got it. We need to move. Just as they turned to leave, the corridor lights turned red, and an automated voice blared through the intercom. Intruder alert, Sector 7. Security teams, respond immediately. Shit, Mira cursed. They know we're here. Move! They sprinted down the corridor, but their path was blocked by an armored squad marching towards the core. Imani didn't hesitate. She opened fire, precise bursts dropping 2 soldiers before the others returned fire, scorching the walls with plasma bolts. Back! Go around! Mira shouted, directing the team through an access hatch into a maintenance shaft. The echoes of pursuing footsteps chased them, and Mira could hear Ray muttering curses under his breath. As they reached a junction, Kel skidded to a halt. This way, emergency egress tunnel. It leads to the surface. They dashed down the narrow passage, Imani laying suppressing fire behind them to slow the pursuit. Mira couldn't stop her heart from pounding as alarms continued to wail. Finally, they burst through a hatch into the open air, the colossal spire of the citadel looming behind them. Mira activated her comm. Ray, get us a pickup. Now! The Ghost Runner decloaked just above them, dropping a rope ladder. Mira shoved Kel and Ray up first, covering their ascent as Imani fired a final volley. Just as Mira started to climb, a plasma shot grazed her shoulder, searing through her armor. She bit down a scream, clinging to the ladder as Imani yanked her up. The Ghost Runner rocketed skyward, dodging fire from ground batteries, and Mira collapsed onto the deck, gripping her burned shoulder. Ray rushed to her side. Captain. I'm fine, Mira grunted. Just get us the hell out of here. As the ship accelerated out of Concordia Prime's atmosphere, Mira glanced at Kel, who was already decrypting the data on a portable console. What did we get? She asked, wincing through the pain. Kel looked up, eyes wide with horror. You need to see this. The Council wasn't just preparing for war. They're planning a full-scale galactic purge. Any species deemed non-compliant will be eradicated. Mira felt a chill run through her veins. They're planning genocide. Kel nodded solemnly. And humanity is at the top of the list. Mira's mind raced as the Ghost Runner rocketed through space, cloaking field flickering but holding steady. Her shoulder throbbed, and Ray was doing his best to patch it up. But her thoughts were far from the pain. She focused on Kel, who was hunched over the console, his fingers deftly decrypting the stolen files. Admiral Reddick's face appeared on the comm screen, his expression stern and concerned. Captain, report. Did you get the data? Mira took a deep breath. We got it, but there's more than we bargained for. The Council isn't just planning to retaliate. They're planning to wipe out any species that dares to resist their rule. A full galactic purge. Reddick's eyes hardened. And humans are at the top of their hit list? Yeah, Mira replied, clenching her jaw. We rattled them bad, and now they're scared. Scared enough to go scorched earth. Reddick rubbed his chin thoughtfully. That's a hell of a problem. We'll need to call an emergency council with our allies and get this intel distributed to every species willing to fight back. Kel looked up, his face grim. We cannot simply share the information without context. The Council will claim it is fabricated, propaganda to weaken their authority. We need to rally the oppressed worlds with undeniable proof. Mira nodded. We need to hit them where it hurts. publicly. If we expose their plan directly on Concordia Prime, where they can't deny it, the galaxy will have no choice but to see the truth. Ray raised an eyebrow. You're suggesting we broadcast the data from inside their capital? After we barely made it out alive? It's risky, Mira admitted, but it's the only way to destroy their credibility. If we leak it through resistance networks, it'll just look like rumors. We need to tear down their propaganda machine from the inside. Reddick's lips twisted into a reluctant grin. You're damn crazy, Lang. But it might just work. You'll need help, though. I'll see if I can rally some of the resistance cells to create distractions. Hit their military assets across the system to pull security away from the capital. Mira gave him a nod. Understood. We'll regroup at Outpost Helios and plan the final strike. Lang out. The screen went dark, and Mira leaned back, exhaling shakily. Imani shot her a sideways glance. Captain, you know what you're proposing is borderline suicide, right? Mira chuckled humorlessly. We've been living on the edge of death since the Council showed up. One more dance won't kill us, at least not until we've finished the job. Kel closed his data console and folded his hands. If you truly intend to expose the Council publicly, we will need to use their own broadcasting infrastructure. The Grand Communication Array is located near the central spire. It is heavily guarded, but if we can patch the data directly into the array, it will transmit to every Council-controlled system simultaneously. Ray whistled. A galaxy-wide transmission. If we pull that off, there's no way they can contain it. Mira clenched her fists. Then that's our goal. We sneak in under the cover of the distraction, get to the array, and blow the lid off their genocide plan. The crew fell into a focused silence as they prepared, running diagnostics on the cloaking system and optimizing weapon efficiency. Despite the tension, there was a sense of grim determination. They had come too far to back down now. After several days of preparation, the Ghost Runner rendezvoused at Outpost Helios, a hidden asteroid base where resistance leaders and allies had gathered. The atmosphere inside the outpost was electric. Representatives from species long oppressed by the Council whispered in dark corners, exchanging rumors of the humans' bold plan. A towering insectoid warrior from the Draxian clans approached Mira, its mandibles clicking in approval. "Human Captain," it rasped, "our forces stand ready. Your audacity has stirred the embers of rebellion. We will strike with you." Mira gave a respectful nod. "Your people have suffered long enough. This ends now." As final plans were laid out, Mira took a quiet moment to herself, staring out at the distant stars. She didn't hear Kel approach until he spoke softly. "You carry the weight of many lives on your shoulders," he said, his tone almost gentle. Mira glanced at him. "That's leadership. You don't get to choose who looks up to you. You just do your best not to let them down." Kel looked down, guilt shadowing his features. "My people once believed the Council was invincible. That submission was survival. Seeing humans fight back, it makes me wonder if we were wrong all along." She put a hand on his shoulder, surprising him. "Regret's a heavy burden. Use it to push forward, not to hold you back. We're here now, and we're going to make this count." Kel gave a small, solemn nod. "You truly are different from any leader I have known." Before she could respond, Imani approached with a sharp salute. "Ready to deploy, Captain. Distraction teams are in position and waiting for our go." Mira squared her shoulders. "Then it's time. Let's make history." The Ghost Runner launched once more, threading through the darkness of space. As they neared Concordia Prime again, the resistance forces struck, their surprise attacks sending shockwaves through the system. Council warships scrambled to respond, pulling security forces away from the Citadel. With their path cleared, Mira guided the Ghost Runner down to the planet's surface, landing covertly near the broadcasting array. The team moved swiftly, using maintenance tunnels to bypass guarded sectors. Kel led the way, his knowledge of the architecture proving invaluable. Finally, they reached the control room, a vast chamber filled with holographic screens and data conduits. Mira connected the data spike to the main console, fingers flying over the controls. "Uploading the files," she whispered. "Ray, start the broadcast as soon as it's ready." As the data streamed through the system, alarms blared. A squad of guards burst into the room, and Imani opened fire, holding them off with deadly accuracy. Ray shouted over the noise, "Almost there! Just a few more seconds!" Mira watched the screen as the progress bar inched forward, each second stretching unbearably long. Just as the last byte uploaded, the system lit up, broadcasting the Council's dark plan to every corner of the galaxy. A hologram of Elder Valthor himself flickered to life, detailing the brutal Purge initiative, his voice calm and confident as he outlined the systematic extermination of non-compliant species. Across the galaxy, beings of every race and creed saw the truth. The Council's ultimate goal laid bare. Riots erupted on conquered worlds, allies turned against their masters, and Council members found themselves facing outrage and rebellion. Ray grinned. "It's working. The whole galaxy knows." Mira didn't have time to celebrate as more guards poured in. "We're done here. Fall back." As they made their escape, Mira couldn't help but feel a fierce pride burning within her. They had struck a blow not just with weapons, but with the truth. The Council's power was cracking, and the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had made its stand. Now, it was time for the oppressed to rise and take back what was theirs. As the Ghost Runner soared back into orbit, Mira glanced at the comms panel, which was lighting up with chaotic transmissions from across the galaxy. Worlds under Council control were erupting in revolt, and even some Council forces were breaking ranks, confused and divided by the sudden collapse of authority. Ray couldn't contain his excitement. "We did it! They're tearing themselves apart from the inside!" Mira allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. "We showed them the truth. Now it's up to the galaxy to decide its fate." Kel leaned against the bulkhead, looking both relieved and haunted. The Council never expected its own arrogance to be its downfall. Their entire power structure is built on fear and obedience. You've shattered that illusion. Imani, cleaning her rifle as if to distract herself from the tension, raised an eyebrow. "That was the easy part. Now we've got a galaxy full of rebels with no coordination, and the Council's loyalists won't just give up." Mira nodded grimly. "They're desperate now. That makes them more dangerous. We need to rally the resistance before the Council regroups." Suddenly, the comm panel flashed with an urgent signal. Ray frowned and tapped a few buttons, and Admiral Reddick's face appeared, more animated than Mira had ever seen him. "Lang, hell of a job. The galaxy's on fire, thanks to you. But we've got a problem," he said, his tone deadly serious. Mira's heart sank. "What now?" "The Council's remnants have gone completely off the rails. They've activated Protocol Annihilation, an ancient contingency designed to wipe out any system that falls to rebellion. They're deploying planet cracker bombs to key worlds." Kel sucked in a breath. Planet crackers. That's a death sentence for billions. The Council would rather destroy their own worlds than lose them. Mira felt a surge of cold fury. "How many are we talking about?" "At least 6 deployments already detected," Reddick replied, his jaw clenched. "Including Earth." Silence filled the cabin. Mira's chest tightened, and her mind went numb for a moment. Earth, the heart of humanity, was now in the crosshairs. Ray's hands trembled as he pulled up the data. The bombs are being launched from Council-controlled dreadnoughts stationed near each target. They've got insane defenses, anti-air, missile systems, escort fleets. We'd be lucky to get within 1,000 clicks. Mira closed her eyes, forcing herself to think past the panic. Can we intercept them before they drop the payload? Reddick hesitated. We've scrambled every available ship to the targets, but we don't have enough firepower to break through. We're too spread out. Kill stepped forward, determination hardening his features. There is one way. The Dreadnought's firing systems are controlled from their primary command cores. If we can infiltrate one of them, we can initiate a system-wide abort command. Imani frowned. Sneak onto a Dreadnought? That's suicide. Mira straightened, jaw set with resolve. We didn't come this far to lose now. Reddick, coordinate the fleet to engage the Dreadnought defenses. We'll use the distraction to board and disable the firing systems. Reddick hesitated, but then he nodded firmly. You're out of your damn mind, but I wouldn't expect anything less. We'll keep them busy. Just make it count. The transmission ended, and Mira addressed her crew. This is it. If we fail, Earth burns, and so does half the galaxy. We'll board the lead Dreadnought and shut down their command systems. Imani, prep the assault gear. Ray, get me detailed schematics on the Dreadnought. Kel, I need every scrap of intel you've got on their command protocols. As they powered up the engines and plotted the course to the nearest Dreadnought, Mira took a moment to herself, leaning against the bulkhead and staring at the distant stars. She didn't hear Kel approach until he spoke softly. Are you prepared to die for this? He asked. Mira gave a bitter smile. I made peace with that a long time ago, but I'll be damned if I let them take Earth without one hell of a fight. Kel nodded, his expression respectful. Your people have a resilience that astounds me. You face extinction not with submission but with fury. She chuckled darkly. We've been on the brink of annihilation for most of our history. It's kind of our thing. The Ghost Runner tore through space, its cloaking field pushed to the limit as it approached the Dreadnought's position. Ahead, the colossal warship loomed like a metal leviathan, surrounded by swarming escort vessels and flak bursts from the human fleet's assault. Ray's hands moved swiftly over the controls. They're focusing on our ships. They haven't detected us yet. We're approaching Docking Bay 12. Imani checked her gear, giving Mira a tight nod. Ready to raise hell, Captain. As the ship docked with a soft clang, Mira led the charge down the ramp, her pulse rifle primed. They moved swiftly through maintenance corridors, using Kel's directions to avoid the main patrol routes. The distant rumble of weapons fire echoed through the hull as human ships bombarded the Dreadnought's outer defenses. They reached the central command core, a vast circular chamber lined with pulsating energy conduits and holographic control panels. 2 guards stood watch, but Imani dropped them silently with precise shots. Ray rushed to the console, plugging in his decryption kit. Accessing command systems. Damn it, they've got layered encryption. This'll take a minute. Kel moved to assist, guiding Ray through the alien coding. Mira kept her weapon trained on the entrance, nerves taut as she listened for approaching footsteps. A sudden alarm blared, and automated turrets unfolded from the ceiling, firing lethal pulses of energy. Mira ducked behind a console, returning fire while Imani blew one of the turrets apart with a well-placed grenade. Ray cursed. They've initiated a lockdown. I can't override it from here. Kel's fingers danced over another panel. There's an emergency shutdown protocol, but it requires dual authorization, command-level access. Mira gritted her teeth. Can we fake it? Kel hesitated. Yes, but it will trigger an internal purge sequence. The ship will start self-destructing. Mira didn't flinch. Do it. Better to blow this thing up than let it annihilate Earth. Kel nodded and initiated the override. The ship shuddered violently, and warning lights flashed as the self-destruct countdown began. Abort codes transmitted, Ray confirmed. The planet cracker systems are shutting down. Mira exhaled sharply. Good. Now let's get out of here before this whole place turns to scrap. They bolted back through the corridors as the dreadnought's core overloaded, explosions ripping through the hull. The Ghost Runner detached just in time, speeding away as the massive ship erupted in a fireball of twisted metal and plasma. On the comm screen, Reddick's voice came through, awash with relief. Lang, you magnificent maniac, you did it. All planet crackers are deactivated. Earth and the other worlds are safe. Mira smiled, finally allowing herself a breath. Just doing our job, Admiral. Tell the galaxy that humanity's still here, and we're not going anywhere. As the remnants of the Council fleet scattered, and the resistance erupted in full force across dozens of systems, Mira looked out at the stars, knowing that they had just reshaped the fate of the galaxy. The Council's reign was crumbling, and humanity had proven that no matter how dark the night, they would always fight to see the dawn. The stars burned cold and indifferent above the fleet of the Ascendants, their shimmering hulls cutting through the void like blades of divine light. They called themselves gods, and for millennia, no one had dared to disagree. Their empire spanned galaxies, their will enforced by ships that could crack planets open like eggshells, their voices echoing through subspace as if the universe itself knelt to listen. They were beautiful, flawless, eternal, or so they thought. That was before the Erebus arrived. It started with a ripple, a faint distortion in the fabric of space that their sensors barely registered. The Ascendant fleet, 5 majestic dreadnoughts, each a monument to their supremacy, hovered above the ruined husk of Kylara, a backwater world they'd reduced to ash for daring to defy their tithe. The airwaves still crackled with the last screams of its people, a sound the Ascendants savored like music. High Lord Zeresh stood on the bridge of the light of divinity, his silver eyes glowing faintly as he surveyed the smoldering wreckage below. His voice, smooth as silk and sharp as a blade, broke the silence. "Let this be a lesson," he said, his words broadcast to every ship in the fleet. "Defiance is a privilege mortals cannot afford." The crew murmured their agreement, their faces serene, their minds untroubled by the slaughter. To them, this was justice, the natural order of a universe shaped by their hands. They were beyond guilt, beyond doubt, until the ripple became a tear, and the tear became a shadow. It emerged without warning, a silhouette so vast it blotted out the stars behind it. The Erebus didn't glide into view like the Ascendant ships. It erupted, a jagged wound in reality, its hull a patchwork of black steel and glowing red scars that pulsed like veins. It was ugly, brutish, a thing forged in fire and hate rather than crafted with elegance. The Ascendants stared, their perfect composure faltering for the first time in centuries. This was no ship of theirs. This was something else, something wrong. "What is it?" Zeresh demanded, his voice losing its velvet edge as he turned to his sensor officer. The officer's fingers danced over the controls, his brow furrowing as the data streamed in. "Unknown origin," he replied, his tone clipped. "No match in our archives. It's massive, larger than anything we've encountered, and it's powering weapons." Zaresh's lips curled into a sneer. Primitive, no doubt. Some forgotten race crawling out of the dirt to challenge us. Destroy it. The order was given, and the light of divinity hummed with energy as its cannons locked onto the intruder. Beams of searing white light lanced through the void, each one capable of vaporizing a moon. The crew watched, expecting the shadow to erupt in a satisfying burst of debris. Instead, the beams struck and vanished. No explosion, no damage, just a faint shimmer across the Erebus's hull, as if it had swallowed the attack whole. A murmur of unease rippled through the bridge. Zaresh's sneer faded, replaced by a flicker of something he hadn't felt in eons. Uncertainty. Before he could speak, the Erebus responded. It didn't fire beams or missiles. It roared. A sound that wasn't sound. A wave of raw, primal fury that slammed into the Ascendant fleet like a physical blow. Subspace screamed with it, a cacophony of rage and defiance that drowned out their systems and set their ships trembling. On the bridge, officers clutched their ears, blood trickling from their noses as the noise tore through their minds. Zaresh staggered, his silver eyes wide, his perfect mask shattered. And then the voice came. "You call yourselves gods," it boomed, low and guttural, resonating through every deck of every ship. It wasn't a transmission, it was a violation, a presence that clawed its way into their skulls. "Look upon us and no despair." The Erebus surged forward, its engines igniting with a red glare that bathed Kailara's ruins in a hellish light. Up close, its hull revealed more than scars. It was etched with names, thousands of them carved in jagged, uneven lines. Names of worlds, of people, of civilizations long erased by the Ascendant's wrath. This wasn't just a ship, it was a monument to their sins, a reckoning given form. Zaresh forced himself upright, his hands trembling as he gripped the command console. "Fire everything," he shouted, his voice cracking. "Erase it from existence." The fleet obeyed, unleashing a storm of light and plasma that lit the void like a second sun. The Erebus took it all, every shot, every blast, its hull glowing hotter but never breaking. And then it fired back. A single lance of crimson energy erupted from its bow, slicing through the radiant spear, the smallest of the dreadnoughts, like a knife through paper. The ship didn't explode. It unraveled, its pristine hull peeling apart in slow, grotesque tendrils before collapsing into a cloud of dust. The Ascendants watched in silence, their godlike certainty crumbling as the debris drifted past their view screens. On the light of divinity, Zaresh's breath came in shallow gasps. What are they?" he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. The answer came not from his crew, but from the Erebus. Its voice returned, colder now, laced with a bitter satisfaction. "We are the ones you forgot, the ones you burned, the ones you called weak." A pause, heavy with menace. "We are human." The word hung in the air, unfamiliar to most of the Ascendants. A myth, a footnote, a species erased so long ago it barely lingered in their oldest records. Yet here they were, not just alive, but angry, their worship a blade forged from the ashes of their past. Zaresh's mind raced, searching for a response, a plan, anything to reclaim control. But the Erebus didn't wait. It charged, its engines flaring as it bore down on the fleet. The Ascendants, for all their power, felt something they'd never known. Fear. They had called themselves gods, but gods don't bleed. And as the Erebus closed in, they began to realize they might. The Erebus didn't slow as it tore through the void, a juggernaut of wrath aimed straight at the Ascendant fleet. On the light of divinity, chaos erupted. Officers shouted over one another, their voices shrill with panic as the human warship closed the distance. Zaresh gripped the edge of his console, his silver eyes locked on the view screen, watching the red glow of the Erebus's engines grow brighter. The air tasted of metal and fear, a sensation so alien to him that it burned. "Shields to maximum," he barked, forcing his voice steady. "Redirect power from the secondary systems, everything to the cannons." The crew scrambled to obey, their movements jerky, their flawless coordination unraveling. The Erebus loomed larger now, its scarred hull filling the screen, those carved names glaring like accusations. Zaresh's mind churned. Humans, they'd said. A dead race, a trivial footnote. How could they wield something like this? How could they dare? The fleet fired again, a desperate barrage of light and energy that streaked across the void. The Erebus didn't flinch. Its hull shimmered, absorbing the onslaught, the red veins pulsing faster as if feeding on their attacks. Then it struck back, not with a single beam this time, but with a wave. A wall of crimson energy surged from its bow, slamming into the celestial wrath with a force that shook the stars. The dreadnought buckled, its elegant spires snapping like dry twigs before it imploded, a silent scream of light and debris. Zaresh's breath caught. 2 ships gone in minutes. His fleet, his invincible armada, was bleeding. "Evasive maneuvers!" he roared. But the Erebus was already moving, faster than anything that size should be. It pivoted with brutal precision, targeting the Eternal Grace. Missiles launched from its flanks, not sleek or refined, but crude, jagged things that screamed through space and detonated in bursts of molten shrapnel. The Grace's shields flared, then failed, and the ship tore apart in a cascade of fire. The voice came again, clawing into their minds. "You built your thrones on our graves." It was slower now, savoring each word. "Now watch them fall." Zaresh's hands shook. He'd never known defeat, never imagined it. But this was no battle. This was slaughter. "Who commands you?" he shouted into the void, his voice cracking. "Show yourself." The Erebus paused, its engines dimming, and for a moment silence gripped the fleet. Then the view screen flickered, and a figure appeared. Human, unmistakably, scarred, weathered, eyes like blackened steel. "I am Admiral Kane," he said, his voice a low growl, "and this is humanity's answer." The screen went dark, and the Erebus charged again, its shadow swallowing the stars. The Erebus didn't hesitate after Kane's words. It surged toward the light of divinity, its jagged hull a nightmare bearing down on Zaresh's flagship. The Ascendant fleet was down to 2 ships now, their pristine elegance marred by fear and faltering resolve. On the bridge, the air buzzed with static and desperation. Zaresh's officers worked frantically, rerouting power, recalibrating weapons, anything to hold the line. But their hands trembled, and their silver eyes darted to their High Lord, seeking the certainty he could no longer give. "Target its core," Zaresh snapped, his voice hoarse. "There must be a weakness. Find it." The light of divinity unleashed a torrent of plasma, streams of white-hot fury that slammed into the Erebus. For a fleeting moment, hope flickered as the human ship's hull flared under the assault. But the glow faded, and the Erebus kept coming, unscathed, relentless. A low rumble shook the deck, and the voice returned, searing through their minds. "Weakness? You taught us to have none." Kane's tone dripped with venom, a promise of retribution centuries in the making. The Erebus fired again, not energy this time, but something worse. Grappling harpoons launched from its sides, massive barbed claws that punched through the Sovereign Dawn's hull with a sickening crunch. The dreadnought lurched, tethered to the human ship like prey caught in a trap. Zaresh watched, horrified, as the Erebus reeled its catch closer. Cables tightened, and the Dawn's pristine surface buckled, splitting open as if gutted. Sparks and bodies spilled into the void, ascendants, immortal no longer. The crew on the light of divinity froze, their godlike poise shattered by the sight of their kin dying like mortals. "Cut the feed!" Zaresh shouted, but it was too late. The Erebus's next move came without warning. Ports along its flank opened, disgorging swarms of smaller craft. Fighters, ugly and angular, moving with a ferocity the Ascendants couldn't comprehend. They descended on the Dawn, tearing into its wounds, their weapons crude but devastating. Explosions bloomed across the dreadnought's frame, and within moments it was gone, reduced to a drifting husk. Zaresh's chest heaved, his mind reeling. 3 ships lost, 3. The humans weren't fighting a war. They were waging annihilation. "Full retreat," he whispered, the words tasting like ash. "Signal the Empire. We need reinforcements, now." The officer at the comms hesitated, his fingers hovering over the controls. "High Lord, the subspace channels, they're jammed. It's them. They've cut us off." A chill ran through Zaresh. Trapped. Alone. The Erebus loomed closer, its red scars pulsing like a heartbeat. Coin's voice returned, quieter now, almost intimate. "No gods to save you. Just us." The light of divinity shuddered as the human ship locked onto it, and Zaresh realized with dawning terror, this was only the beginning. The light of divinity groaned under the strain as the Erebus closed in, its shadow swallowing the last vestiges of hope on the ascendant flagship. Zaresh stood rigid, his silver eyes reflecting the crimson glow seeping through the view screen. The bridge was a cacophony of alarms and shouted orders, but it all blurred into noise. His fleet, his pride, his proof of divinity, was gone, shredded by these humans, these ghosts from a past he'd never bothered to remember. Now, it was just him and the Erebus, and the weight of that truth crushed him. "Fire the reserves," he roared, slamming a fist onto the console. "Everything we have, hit them now!" The ship's cannons flared to life, spewing a desperate volley of energy that streaked toward the human warship. The Erebus didn't dodge or falter. It took the hits, its hull absorbing the barrage like a predator savoring a futile struggle. Then it retaliated. A pulse erupted from its core, not a weapon but a shockwave, a ripple of force that slammed into the light of divinity with the weight of a dying star. The ship lurched, its pristine decks splitting as bulkheads buckled. Officers screamed as they were thrown against walls, their bodies crumpling like paper. Zaresh clung to his station, blood trickling from his temple, his perfect form marred for the first time in centuries. Kain's voice clawed into his skull again, relentless. "You thought us broken. You thought us dust." The words carried a weight beyond anger. Grief, forged into something sharper. "We built this from your ruins." The Erebus surged closer, its harpoons firing once more. They struck the light of divinity's flank, piercing deep, and the ship shuddered as the cables tightened, dragging it toward the human behemoth. Zaresh's mind raced, searching for an escape, a miracle. "Divert power to the engines!" he shouted, his voice ragged. "Break free, now!" The engines flared, straining against the pull, but the Erebus held firm, its grip unyielding. Sparks flew as the hull began to tear, metal screeching in protest. Through the chaos, the view screen flickered, and Kain appeared again. His face was a map of scars, each line a story of loss and defiance. "You burned our worlds," he said, his voice low, steady. "You took our children, our homes, you called it order." He leaned closer, eyes blazing. "We call it war." The screen cut out, and the Erebus unleashed its fighters again. They swarmed the light of divinity, their weapons ripping into its defenses. Explosions rocked the bridge, and Zaresh fell to his knees, the taste of defeat bitter on his tongue. He'd called himself a god, but gods don't kneel. Yet here he was, broken as the humans, those he'd deemed beneath him, tore his world apart. The Erebus loomed, its scarred hull filling the void, and Zaresh knew his empire would hear of this, and it would tremble. The light of divinity trembled like a wounded animal, its once pristine hull now a jagged ruin of twisted metal and flickering lights. The Erebus held it fast, its harpoons embedded deep, cables taut as they reeled the ascendant flagship closer to its scarred maw. On the bridge, Zaresh pulled himself to his feet, his silver eyes dim with exhaustion and fury. Blood streaked his face, a crimson insult to his divine facade, and his hands shook as he gripped the shattered remnants of his command console. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid scent of burning circuits, the cries of his crew a distant echo beneath the relentless hum of the human warship. "Status," he barked, his voice raw, barely audible over the chaos. An officer, young, her pristine uniform torn, stumbled toward him, her face pale with terror. "Shields are down, High Lord," she stammered. "Engines at critical. We're losing her." Her words faltered as another explosion rocked the ship, sending a shower of sparks cascading from the ceiling. Zaresh's gaze snapped to the view screen, where the Erebus loomed, its red-veined hull pulsing like a living thing, a beast savoring its prey. He'd never known powerlessness. For millennia, he'd bent galaxies to his will, crushed rebellions with a whisper, watched worlds kneel at his feet. Now he was the one cornered, his empire's might reduced to this single, failing ship. And the humans, those vermin he'd dismissed as extinct, were the ones holding the blade. The irony gnawed at him, a bitter poison seeping into his bones. Kane's voice returned, cutting through the noise like a knife. "You hear it, don't you?" It rasped, low and deliberate, burrowing into Zaresh's mind. "The silence of your gods." The words carried a weight that made his chest tighten, a mockery laced with truth. Zaresh clenched his fists, nails digging into his palms as he glared at the screen. The human's scarred face flickered into view again, unyielding, his eyes burning with a fire Zaresh couldn't comprehend. "You're nothing," Zaresh spat, his voice trembling with defiance. "A shadow of a dead race, clinging to vengeance. You think this changes anything?" He forced a laugh, sharp and hollow, but it died in his throat as the Erebus responded. Not with words, but with action. A new weapon emerged from its hull, a massive cannon unfolding like a predator's jaw, its barrel glowing with a sickly green light. The air on the bridge grew heavy, the crew's breaths catching as the weapon charged. "High Lord, it's targeting us!" the officer cried, her voice breaking. "Energy readings are off the scale. We can't—" Her warning was cut short as the cannon fired. A beam of emerald energy lanced through the void, striking the light of Divinity's bow. The ship screamed, a sound of rending metal and fracturing hope, as the beam carved through its hull, slicing off a third of its length in a single, brutal stroke. The severed section drifted away, a lifeless husk spilling debris and bodies into the darkness. Zaresh staggered, the deck tilting beneath him. He caught himself against a railing, his vision swimming as the reality sank in. His ship, his sanctuary, was dying. The Erebus pressed its advantage, its fighters swarming the wound, their weapons tearing deeper into the flagship's guts. Explosions blossomed across the view screen, each one a dagger to Zaresh's pride. Kane's voice returned, softer now, almost pitying. "You took everything from us. Our homes, our future, our names." A pause, heavy with memory. "We took them back." The Erebus surged closer, its shadow engulfing the light of divinity, and Zaresh felt it, a chill that wasn't just fear, but something deeper, something primal. Regret. He'd burned their worlds, yes. He'd erased them from history, convinced they were beneath notice. But they hadn't forgotten. They'd built this monstrosity, this Erebus from the ashes he'd left behind. And now it was here, a mirror reflecting every sin he'd buried. The cannon charged again, its green glow casting an eerie light across the bridge, and Zaresh knew. This was no longer a battle. This was judgment. The Erebus fired, and the light of divinity shattered, its divine light snuffed out by the wrath of those it had forsaken. The light of divinity was no longer a ship. It was a carcass, its hull split open, bleeding fire and debris into the void. The bridge, once a gleaming testament to ascendant supremacy, was now a graveyard of shattered consoles and broken bodies. Zaresh clung to life amid the wreckage, his silver eyes clouded with dust and despair. The green beam from the Erebus had torn through the ship's heart, leaving it adrift, its engines silent, its crew reduced to whispers and moans. He crawled through the chaos, his pristine robes shredded, his hands slick with blood. His own, for once. The viewscreen flickered, its cracked surface struggling to hold an image. Through the static, the Erebus loomed, its scarred hull a silent accusation, its red veins pulsing with a rhythm that mocked his faltering pulse. Zaresh's breath came in ragged gasps, each one a battle against the smoke choking the air. He'd lost everything, his fleet, his ship, his illusion of divinity. And yet the humans weren't done. They wanted more than his defeat. They wanted his soul. Kane's voice slithered into his mind again, unbidden, inescapable. You thought power was yours alone. It was calm now, a predator's patience, each word a nail in Zaresh's coffin. We learned it from you, then made it ours. The Erebus shifted, its massive form aligning with the light of divinity's ruins, and a new sound pierced the silence. A low, grinding roar as docking clamps extended from its underside. They latched onto the flagship's remains with a jolt that threw Zaresh to the floor, metal screeching as the human ship began to pull them in. He clawed his way to his feet, panic surging through him. "No," he rasped, his voice a shadow of its former command. "Not like this." He stumbled towards the weapons console, or what was left of it, fingers fumbling over dead controls. A surviving officer, his face half burned, grabbed his arm. "High Lord, we're breached," he croaked. "They're boarding." Zaresh's head snapped toward the corridor beyond the bridge. The distant clang of boots echoed through the ship, growing louder, closer. Humans. Not their machines, not their weapons, but them, coming to finish what their warship had started. He drew his ceremonial blade, a useless relic now, its edge dulled by centuries of peace, and turned to face the inevitable. The first humans emerged from the smoke, shadows in battered armor, their faces obscured by visors streaked with ash. They moved with purpose, weapons raised, crude, ugly things, nothing like the Ascendant's elegant tools of war. Yet they'd won. Zaresh raised his blade, a final act of defiance, but a shot rang out, and it clattered from his hand, his wrist screaming with pain. He fell to his knees, disarmed, defenseless. A figure stepped forward, taller than the rest, his armor marked with a single red stripe. He removed his helmet, revealing Coin's scarred face, those blackened steel eyes boring into Zaresh. "You don't get to die yet," Kane said, his voice low, steady. "Not until you see." "See what?" Zaresh spat, blood dripping from his lips. "Your vengeance? Your petty triumph?" Kane crouched, meeting his gaze. "Not ours. Theirs." He gestured to the soldiers behind him, their visors lifting one by one. Faces, human faces, stared back, each one etched with loss, with rage, with a fire Zaresh had never understood. They weren't just warriors. They were survivors. The remnants of worlds he'd burned, lives he'd erased. "You thought us gone," Coin said, rising. "But we remembered. Every name, every scream." He turned to his crew. "Take him." Hands seized Zaresh, dragging him through the wreckage, his protests drowned by the clamor of their boots. The Erebus swallowed them, its corridors dark and jagged, walls carved with more names, millions of them, a litany of the dead. Zaresh's strength failed, his body limp in their grasp. But his mind screamed. This wasn't defeat, this was damnation. And as they pulled him deeper into the ship, he realized The humans hadn't just returned. They'd come to rewrite the stars. The Erebus's belly was a labyrinth of shadow and steel, its corridors a maze of jagged edges and flickering red light. Zaresh's captors dragged him through it, their grip ironclad, their silence deafening. His legs scraped against the rough floor, his once regal form reduced to a broken husk, blood and grime streaking his silver skin. The air was thick with the stench of oil and rust, a far cry from the sterile perfection of his lost flagship. But it wasn't the ship that chilled him. It was the names. They covered every wall, every panel, etched in crude, angry strokes. Tarsus, Elira, Vion. Worlds he'd crushed, lives he'd erased, each one a wound staring back at him. Kine led the way, his armored figure a dark beacon in the gloom, his steps deliberate, unhurried. The other humans followed, their faces, those he'd glimpsed, burned into Zaresh's mind. They weren't just soldiers. They were ghosts, resurrected from the ashes of his conquests. He'd never seen their kind as anything but insects, insignificant specks beneath his divine heel. Now they towered over him, their rage a palpable force that pressed against his chest. They stopped in a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in darkness, its walls lined with more names, too many to count. The floor was stained, dark patches glinting wetly under the dim light. Zaresh's stomach churned as he realized what it was. Blood, old and new, a testament to something he couldn't yet grasp. Kyan turned, his scarred face unreadable, and nodded to his crew. They released Zaresh, letting him collapse onto the cold metal, his breath shallow, his body screaming with pain. "Stand," Kane said, his voice a quiet command. Zaresh didn't move, defiance flickering faintly in his chest. A boot slammed into his ribs, and he gasped, curling inward as agony flared. "Stand," Kane repeated, colder now. With trembling limbs, Zaresh obeyed, rising unsteadily, his silver eyes locked on the human's unrelenting gaze. "You think this is justice?" Zaresh rasped, his voice brittle. "Torturing me? Killing me? It changes nothing. My empire will—" "Your empire," Coin cut in, stepping closer, "is a lie built on bones." He gestured to the chamber, the names, the blood. "This isn't about you. It's about them." From the shadows, figures emerged, more humans, dozens of them, their faces gaunt, their eyes hollow but alive with a fire that made Zaresh flinch. They wore rags, their bodies marked with scars, their hands clutching makeshift weapons. Survivors. Not soldiers, but the ones who'd lived through his purges, who'd crawled from the rubble he'd left behind. A woman stepped forward, her hair matted, her voice trembling with fury. "You burned Elira," she said, pointing a shaking finger at him. "My daughter was 6. She screamed for me as your ships turned her to ash." Another man, older, his face a map of grief, spoke next. "Tarsus. My whole village. Gone in a night. You didn't even know our names." Zaresh's mouth opened, but no words came. He'd never heard their voices, never cared to. They'd been numbers, resources, obstacles. Now they surrounded him, a chorus of pain and hate, their stories crashing over him like waves. Coin watched, silent, as the survivors closed in, their hands reaching, their eyes promising retribution. "You'll see," Kane said, his voice a low growl. "Every world you took, every life you stole, they're here, and they remember." He stepped back, and the crowd surged forward. Zaresh screamed as they seized him, their fingers digging into his flesh, their voices rising in a roar of anguish and rage. He fought, weakly, but there were too many, their strength born of suffering he'd inflicted. They dragged him toward a platform at the chamber's center, its surface stained with more blood, its purpose clear. Zaresh's mind fractured, terror swallowing his pride. He'd called himself a god, But gods don't beg. Yet, as the humans raised their weapons, he did. And the Erebus echoed with their cries, a requiem for the divine. The platform in the Erebus's blood-stained chamber was cold beneath Zaresh's knees, its surface slick with the ghosts of those who'd come before him. The survivors' hands held him down, their grip unrelenting, their voices a storm of grief and fury that drowned his pleas. His silver eyes darted wildly, searching for an escape that didn't exist, his once divine composure shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. Above him, the names on the walls loomed, a silent jury bearing witness to his end. He'd ruled galaxies, crushed worlds with a thought. But here, in the belly of this human warship, he was nothing. Kyne stood at the edge of the platform, his scarred face a mask of cold resolve, his blackened steel eyes fixed on Zaresh. The survivors pressed closer, their makeshift weapons, shards of metal, broken tools, gleaming in the dim light. The woman from Elira stepped forward again, her trembling hands clutching a jagged blade. "For my daughter," she whispered, her voice breaking as she raised it high. Zaresh's scream was cut short as the blade fell, biting into his shoulder, blood spraying across the platform. Pain seared through him, raw and mortal, and he thrashed against their hold, but they were too many, too strong. The old man from Tarsus was next, his weathered hands steady as he drove a rusted spike into Zaresh's side. "For my village," he growled, twisting it deeper. Zaresh's vision blurred, his breath coming in wet, choking gasps. One by one, they took their turn. Each strike a name, a memory, a debt repaid. His body became a canvas of their vengeance, his blood mingling with the stains beneath him, his godhood bleeding out with every blow. Kyne watched in silence, his presence a steady anchor amid the chaos. When the last survivor stepped back, panting, their weapons dripping, Zaresh was a ruin, alive, barely, his chest heaving, his silver eyes dull with agony. The chamber fell quiet, the air heavy with the weight of what they'd done. Kyne stepped onto the platform, his boots ringing against the metal, and crouched beside the fallen High Lord. "You thought us weak," he said, his voice low, almost gentle. "You thought us gone. But we endured. We built this—" He gestured to the Erebus, its scarred hull a testament to their survival. "From the ashes you left us." He leaned closer, his breath warm against Zaresh's ear. "Your empire will fall. Not today, not tomorrow, but it will. And when it does, they'll know who broke it." Zaresh's lips moved, a faint whisper escaping. "Kill me. Please." His voice was a broken thing, a plea from a man who'd never known mercy until he needed it. Kyne shook his head. "Number you live. You carry this back to your kind." He stood, turning to his crew. "Patch him up. Send him home." The survivors murmured, some protesting, but Kyne's gaze silenced them. "Death's too easy. Let him tell them what he's seen." They obeyed, dragging Zaresh's mangled form away, his blood trailing behind him. Hours later, a battered escape pod launched from the Erebus, limping toward ascendant space, carrying a message in flesh and ruin. The warship turned, its engines flaring red as it vanished into the void, leaving Kailara's ashes behind. On the Erebus's bridge, Kyne stood alone, staring at the stars. The names on the walls whispered to him, millions of voices, quiet now, but not at peace. They'd won this battle, broken a god, but the war was far from over. He touched a scar on his cheek, a memory of a world lost, and clenched his fist. The Ascendants would come again, stronger, angrier, but so would humanity. The Erebus sailed on, a shadow among the stars, its hull scarred but unbowed. They'd called themselves gods once, the Ascendants. Now they'd witnessed something greater, the wrath of those they'd forgotten, and the universe, vast and indifferent, trembled at the sound of humanity's return.